Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. Let's get ready to rumble!
Welcome to the Strictly Business Podcast with John Stanko and Mike Ritz.
Y'all ready for this?
It's not personal, sir. It's strictly business.
Welcome, everyone, to the second episode of the Strictly Business Podcast. John Stanko here with Michael Ritz. We are here bringing you football today, both the NFL and NCAA football. And, Mike, before we get started, a special shout-out to Pete Considori, fellow Iona MassCom grad, doing a great job on the opening read for us. So I want to give a special shout-out and thanks to him.
Yeah, he did. He really came through in the clutch. Another Iona MassCom student getting things done.
Yes, he does. Now, someone who didn't really get anything done. We're going to start off with USC, and USC's Josh Shaw, cornerback for the Trojans, was at one point a hero to America, saving a drowning child from a pool, and then quickly things just fell apart. And eventually, an entire story has unraveled now that I think you couldn't even write this down in fiction. That's how crazy it is. Mike, I don't know if you could summarize the story for everyone listening who doesn't know, but this entire situation surrounding Shaw is out of this world.
Yeah, I mean, for those who don't know, Josh Shaw, first of all, I think one of the worst things about it is that this guy is a senior on a senior defensive back on the USC football team. Obviously, USC, a very prominent college football team, and he lied about jumping out of a second-story window to save his drowning 7-year-old nephew. That was the report that came out. It came out on Monday, and the USC website even wrote a story about it that day to kind of praise Shaw for such a heroic act because he hurt both of his ankles, so he had to be out for a significant amount of time, and that was the story that he told the coaches. And yeah, so to everyone's knowledge, he jumped out of a second-story window to save his drowning nephew, and then USC began investigating Shaw's story on Tuesday after receiving information from people who challenged Shaw's account.
Yeah, I mean, what's crazy is I believe that Shaw is also a captain on the team. Reading some articles. Some articles said he was, some articles didn't mention it, so I'm not entirely sure about that. But yeah, he suffered 2 high ankle sprains, which if you think about it, jumping out of a second-story floor, jumping onto concrete, and you only have 2 high ankle sprains, you're pretty lucky the way it is. Now, the second story that's coming out, which involves him possibly being in some criminal investigation in the apartment, but maybe not, we don't know yet, that account has him jumping off the 3rd floor and still only getting 2 high ankle sprains, so he's still very lucky there. But my big question is, why would the school's PR department immediately trust a student telling this kind of ridiculous story and immediately go publicize it without even double-checking the facts? This boggles my mind.
That's a great point, John. That is a really good point. Yeah, I guess they were just maybe this guy was just so trustworthy that they figured, you know what, he wouldn't lie about this. But you're right. No matter what, you got to double check everything. But what I'm saying is, going back to the police reports and everything, the LAPD confirmed that a man named Josh Shaw was mentioned, but not as a suspect in a reported break-in at a downtown apartment on Saturday night. That's what the LAPD confirmed. Mm-hmm. And then Shaw actually issued an apology after he was found out, but he did everything but say what actually happened to his ankle. So he said, I'm sorry. He admitted he lied, but he still didn't say actually what happened. And then after interviewing several people in the building, LAPD interviewed a woman that said somebody pried open a window, entered the apartment, and fled, but nothing was taken. So that kind of shows me that if it was Shaw, it would kind of explain the broken ankles, because if he would open up the window and he had to flee, he was afraid that somebody within the apartment, that would give him an opportunity to flee and jump from the balcony. So it's kind of a backward story. But even the story today that he might be wrapped up in a domestic violence case because it was reported yesterday that it allegedly was his girlfriend's apartment.
I mean, yeah, it's just the details are piling on now. That what makes it so crazy is that he came up with an elaborate little lie to say why he hurt himself. I don't know why he couldn't just say he fell down the stairs. I mean, that's a pretty easier thing to cover up than, oh, I jumped out of a two-story window and saved a drowning child. I don't know why you would, if you were going to lie, you'd make it that elaborate. But, I mean, it's crazy with the domestic abuse, with domestic violence case that you mentioned. And, I mean, what's also crazy is the fact that Steve Sarkisian, who was forced to defend his players, saying that it's great what he did, he's a hero, blah, 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 when the report first came out. But now with Shaw on suspended for indefinitely, also with the injury, Sarkisian did not rule out the possibility that he can be back this season.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he wants to see what he actually did. If somehow all of this is kind of fabricated on what he actually did, and it ends up coming out that, he ended up, just like dropping something on his feet, or was he missing curfew? Is that why he lied? And if it's something smaller, then he can get suspended for a couple games and then come back. But if it's anything to do with the LAPD and kind of like what they're investigating him for now, I doubt that he'd be back at all if he did any wrongdoing legally.
Yeah, I mean, the quote from Sarkisian was, potentially, sure, obviously there are some other things that have to take place. In the meantime, he's got to take care of his health and take care of himself, and when the time's right, if the time's right to bring him back, we will. So there are still a lot of things unraveling as investigations are going on and stuff like that. Shaw's lawyer, Donald Etra, said that there was no criminal actions done by Shaw whatsoever. However, the lawyer does admit that the injury Shaw sustained did happen at the alleged apartment. So right now, Shaw is backed into a corner because now everything he says is going to be constituted as whether or not he's telling the truth because, I mean, the boy cried wolf, the boy lied, and now no one's going to trust him because he got called out on it. So I'm really interested to see where this goes.
Yeah, no one's going to trust anything that this guy says now because he grabbed everyone out of the heart and pulled everyone's heart out of their bodies after because everyone was so on this story on Monday saying, oh, what a great thing this guy did, blah, blah, blah. And now all of a sudden everyone hates him now because he created this lie. But I knew it was bad because once they were questioning if the story was authentic and they said that he lied, I really would be surprised if he didn't do anything wrong because whatever he did, he didn't feel comfortable going to a coach. He didn't feel comfortable saying what happened to one of his boys, one of the fellow players on the team. Because think about it this way: you know how many personnel is on a football team between coaches and advisors and players? He wasn't comfortable saying this to anybody.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm sure a couple of players know what the deal is. Who knows if he was actually with one of the players when some of this stuff has happened? But I'm saying I knew it was bad when they said that he lied, and because he really was probably trying to hide something that he wasn't supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and the biggest plot hole to me was who leaves a 7-year-old child near a pool unattended? What parent would do that? That was a big thing for me. That's just not plausible in my mind that a parent would do that.
Exactly, because in his story, he said that no one was around, and that's when he jumped from the balcony to save his 7-year-old nephew. So he said nobody was around. It was just his nephew in the pool, and he jumped from the balcony and saved his nephew. So even that just kind of sounds fishy without even any outside wrongdoing. That sounds like a fishy story because where was everybody?
Yeah, and now to pile on some more of USC's public relations problems, Coach Sarkisian was accused of being a racist by former USC tailback Anthony Brown. Brown said Sarkisian is a racist man who treated me like a slave in his office. These accusations were made on Instagram, and then they were promptly deleted. So this just adds more problems onto USC PR staff. Now, granted, both players and both current players and former players have come to the defense of Sarkisian, saying that's simply not true. Sarkisian has denied all remarks. But this just happens a couple of days after this whole story unfolds with Shaw. It's just not good timing at all for the Trojans.
Yeah, I mean, it's a story right now, but I don't think that it's going to come to anything because there were so many people to back up this coach. There wasn't one player that agreed with this guy. And let's face it, this player was the 6th running back on the depth chart. He wasn't a star player. He wasn't getting much playing time. He was always injured. And it seems kind of funny to me that when he decides to not be on the team anymore, he starts pointing fingers at the coach. So that's all I'm saying. It's not like it's a prominent player saying this. This guy was obviously angry at the coach. I'm not saying, I hope that he's wrong, and I hope he's not a racist, but it just kind of seems that this player has a grudge against his coach for not necessarily giving him minutes that he might have thought he deserved.
Yeah, and, it didn't bother USC as they played very well in Week 1. They got a 52-13 win over Fresno State at home. They scored 21 points alone in both the first and the third quarter. So they routed Fresno State. So obviously it was not a distraction to the team. But I'm interested to see where the Shaw story goes because if it is reported that he's in some domestic abuse case, like you mentioned, it being his girlfriend's apartment or something like that, I'm really curious to see what Sarkisian's actions will be, as well with the university, because Shaw put them in a really, really tight spot.
Yeah, it does. And look, at least for me, if you have, it's one thing to, like I said, to miss a curfew or to even like skip a class, something academic, something you can keep confined in the school of USC. But if you have the LAPD looking at you and you did something wrong outside of the school where now the school can't contain it, that's where I think the longer suspension happens. You know what I mean? So it's one thing, I mean, who knows? He might get arrested. If this guy gets arrested, I'm not saying he's going to serve time necessarily, but if he gets arrested, it's going to be hard for a first-year head coach at USC to stick up for his player for doing this. It's a first-year head coach here. He wants to prove that he belongs at a school like USC. He might try to make an example out of Shaw more than anything.
Yeah, and I frankly think he should because this is it's a lie that he told. I'm not going to lie. I bought into it. I retweeted the story. When I saw it, I was like, this is a great story. I bought into it. I fell into the trap, and then I was put in my place when all the true stuff came out, and I acknowledge that I bought in. But, I mean, it's a crazy thing that's happening, and I think USC as an institution is going to have a lot to say as to whether or not he's back on the program, and I don't think they're going to allow him to be back this year, me personally, with everything that's going on and everything they're dealing with now.
Well, they certainly look pretty good without him. They looked pretty good without him this weekend.